Welcome, Chaz. Welcome to Leadership Inside Out. It is a real privilege to have you here today. I'm so excited for the stories that you've got, your career, and so welcome to the podcast.
Well, lovely to meet you, Guy. Eventually, it's been a long time coming, I think.
Wonderful. Chaz, please, can you start at the beginning, where you think the beginning is, and tell me a little bit about your background, a little bit about your story, and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, so I was always good at science at school, good at sport at school, and when I added it all together, I thought, well, I'll go and do engineering and then join the army for 3 years and see where it took me. And it took me 30 years, and it was a wonderful career that ended up, along sort of three main themes: engineering, building stuff, or not. Um, Working with the ground in the environment and nature, and it was wonderfully positive. And working with the people who use that infrastructure, leading teams, large multinational diverse teams, which has always been a challenge.
Yeah.
But also working in major change programs, reorganizing organizations, procuring new equipment, doing all those complex things that invariably go wrong. That's sort of where I've sort of found my niche in life, is doing those really difficult bits with people who want to do the same. But it's not easy, and that took me up to leading regiments on operations squadrons in the Far East, uh, and then being the chief engineer within UK's NATO core headquarters, which was the pinnacle. It couldn't have got better than that. It was the best place to end up in the army for me as a Royal Engineer.
Wow.
So then I decided to step off as a high point, which was one of the best decisions I made. Take decisions and move on in a good place, not in a bad place.
Right.
And I'm now a consultant. I work with public and private sector organizations, advising them on how to do that change, how to prepare yourself, leadership, organization structures, so that you're ready for that large change that's coming, because all companies have got to do that. If you stand still, it just doesn't work. So it's been 30 years to get to this point.
Wow. Can you take us back? Sandhurst, a long time ago. What did you do at school? Was that Sandhurst after university, or was that Sandhurst after school?
So interestingly, I went to a lovely school in Somerset, um, but I didn't quite fit in. It was fine. There were some very talented, gifted musicians and other people there. So I decided to leave at 16 and join the Army Sixth Form College,
Yeah.
which was just perfect for me. I did science, I could play sport, I could join the army. It just all fitted. But I then went to university to do civil engineering before I then went to Sandhurst.
Okay.
Uh, I just didn't feel at 18 I was quite mature enough to, lead 30 guys on operations. I just needed more time to be able to prepare for that. So I went to university, got qualified there, and then went to Sandhurst,
Wow.
which I think in retrospect is the most amazing experience. At the time there, you rarely get to stop and think about this amazing leadership and management training that you're
Yeah.
getting.
Yeah.
But again, I wasn't one of those who was natural. There were other people who fitted in. And there's a great, there's an example. When I turned up, everyone else turned up with their parents dropping them off in their cars, and everyone was in suits and ties, and they were there to welcome. I had a 1970s VW Beetle, and I drove on to Sandhurst Parade Square, and I had a hole in the exhaust, so it made a horrible noise as I came on. And as I got out the car, one of the instructors came up to me and said, "Welcome, but your car isn't very officerly. You're going to have to change that." And there was an amazing thing. I thought, really? Is your car one of your leadership qualities? And it was a real insight into how the army treats you and how you need to change to become part of an organization,
Hmm.
but then how you need to become yourself again once you become part of that organization.
Wow. And it's a wonderful point that as leaders, it's not just about our qualities, it's actually about the perception that we give people as well. And we try and ignore that sometimes, but that perception that we are leaders starts with that very first view that we see, that very first impression that we give people.
Yeah. Well, and it's been a theme probably throughout my career. And I remember as I was about to take over command of a regiment, and it was a huge honor. And I remember chatting to a general at the time, and he basically said it's a performance. You must never let your facade down that you're the leader.
Mm.
And I wasn't sure about this. And then when I took over the leadership role, I really struggled between being that authentic leader that I wanted to be, and on the other side, being that figurehead that the people in the organization wanted me to be. And I had to navigate that path really carefully all the way through so I could be the honest, authentic guy that I was, that they really understood my values and what I wanted, but then presented myself in a way that the organization expected of me. And no one taught me that to navigate that challenge. I had to work my way through that.
Wow. So Sandhurst, great engineer. I mean, that's a very solid, starting point. Royal Engineers. Where did your career go from there?
So I went straight out to Germany, joined an armored engineer regiment, which is charging around battlefields in tanks, making a mess of things, and but really tough, arduous conditions, training in Poland and Canada, going on operations in Northern Ireland, and then at the start of Bosnia in 95, 96. So really testing leadership right from the start and working out what works, the balance between the charisma required to be a leader, but also that's not it. You've got to work hard. You've got to care for your people. You've got to set clear direction. You've got to be the full package. You can't just be part of that. And to have those first 2 years with so much packed in was fantastic. And then moving on to other units, a few desk jobs, which are really important to understand how the army works. Then squadron command, where I was lucky enough to take my squadron to Afghanistan. And some really tough, challenging leadership, but also hugely rewarding in terms of, despite the outcome in Afghanistan, what we did was make a huge difference. And our team, as part of a battle group, but the engineers made a huge difference. We built an environment that allowed the politics to take place. And that was really powerful. And to learn the power of infrastructure in people's lives, which I think we sometimes forget a little in the UK.
And I'll be very clear. I have huge respect for the forces. I think my background is human resources, and most of the theory of human resources comes from the forces, comes from what's tried and tested actually in the battle force. And there's a perception that some people have that being a leader in the forces is all about telling people what to do, and that could not be further from the truth. It is truly about proper, authentic leadership.
Yeah, and I think in my career, even with the authority of command that's given to you as a leader, I cannot recall a time when I've ordered anyone to do anything, because by the time you have to give that order, they already know what they've got to do. You've been clear about the plan. People are volunteering for the action, even if they know it's dangerous, they know it's their role, and they know they want to be part of that team, and it's building people up to that point so that they volunteer for those really hard tasks. And it's wonderful to be part of an organization where that is the case.
And the other thing that you've just mentioned that I think also is a key part is that leadership in the forces is not just about front line. It is it's important to have the desk job. It's important to have that variety to give you balance and a broader perspective as well.
Yeah. So there's leadership in when you're in on the front line. There's leadership in preparing yourself to get to the front line, which is the hard part. The people have got to trust and respect you at the point you ask them to do something difficult. You can't just land and give them those orders. But you also, the part of it, you need to understand the organization and the context and the politics in the area you're working in. But you also need time off. You need to look after yourself. If you go on a 6-month tour, you've taken 6 months to prepare for that tour, and your family has taken a hit. Your friends have taken a hit. Everything else in your life, you've got to be able to reset. And I think it's something that the American Army found really difficult on their 12-month tours. And they were doing 12 months on, 12 months off. But that 12 months off was training for the next 12 months. And it was so hard on the people and the families. And you can't run your life like that. You've got to have a balance to reset yourself and get back.
So, I mean, I've looked at your career, and so how did you go from commanding a regiment through to, that very impressive job in NATO, chief engineer? What was that transition?
Well, people always say that when you leave regimental command, it is the pinnacle. It's when you join the army, there's nothing higher really than your commanding officer. It's the figurehead when you join. So you get to that, and everyone says it's difficult to step off. For me, I went to a role in the Army headquarters, running our procurement programs, looking after the future of the Royal Engineers, their equipment, their organisation. And so it was a hugely rewarding position to be in, to have led soldiers and then be responsible for the future organisation that took that forward. So it was a step onwards and upwards for me. I really enjoyed that. It's hard. There's no anywhere in government, there's not enough money, there's not enough time. You've got to work with your priorities. But working with that and then working with equipment programs to make sure that our soldiers of the future have the right kit was really powerful. But that also got me into leadership at a much higher level. So not the direct leadership of a regiment of engineers who all know what they're doing. It's leadership, leading a complex organization where everyone has different skills, how you lead at that strategic level so that you pull everything together to a much larger end. And being involved in procurement, I think, got me to that level where I could be a brigade commander in a NATO headquarters, because you can pull all the things together from a NATO, from a multinational, from a different capability, to bring everything together for what NATO needs in this really complex world that we live in.
And you suggest, you hinted, but clearly a very political role as well. So, that's a different set of skill sets from, commanding, a group of soldiers. How do you learn those skills? How do you transition from that direct, or that direct authority to much more of an indirect approach?
I think to start with leadership, you always think it's you looking down, you picking up what you've been told from above, and then you focus your leadership down. But leadership is 360. And the longer you serve, you realize that those relationships, downwards, sideways, upwards, that you can only do it if you've built all those relationships. You've made the friendship before you get to really need the information and the strength you've got from that relationship. So you've got to travel, you've got to speak to people, you've got to understand every person's point of view, so that by the time you make that decision, you already understand the context you're working in. And I think that took me 10, 15 years to understand in the Army, that you've got to look 360 in leadership. Right. But by doing that, it prepares you to work at that higher level.
Wow. And looking back, highlights of that forces, that Army career?
So the highlights are it's the people, it's the team. I don't think you ever forge relationships. I'm not sure who does it anywhere else in life, where you're thrown into such difficult circumstances and everyone comes together. And even now we meet up with old friends that you served on operations with, and you have that depth of friendship that I don't think could be forged in any other environment than the military. But most of those have all come from those operational deployments that we've had, whether they're a good thing or not, but the world has not been a safe place since I joined the army. It was post-Cold War and what was going to happen, and then the Balkans, and then the Middle East, and everything else. It's not been an easy time, but that's given the opportunity to deploy to Northern Ireland, to the Balkans, to Iraq, to Afghanistan, to other United Nations operations. And all of those are seared in my memory as just huge highlights, to be able to lead our men and women on operations and do some really amazing things.
Wow. And as you said, in the last couple of years, you've moved into the private sector.
Yeah.
How was that transition?
I have to say it was, it's always going to be hard, but I wanted difficult. I suppose I started from the perspective of doing complex things, and that's what I wanted to do, carry on working with large private and public sector organizations who are doing difficult, complex things over many years, and help them through it using the experience that I've got from the military and procurement, and then work with all the diverse experience that sit within my current team. Again, multinational, some management consultants, some engineers, some in leadership roles, but bringing that together for a new powerful team that we can take out and help people through these really complex problems that our nation has is really rewarding. But I'm having to work really hard. There's no doubt about that.
Well, and I can imagine, I mean, I've worked with a number of ex-forces over the years, and they bring incredible skills, but it can be a very different culture, a very different working environment that they face. And I know, sometimes that can be quite a shift in mindset, especially to adapt to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not that. I think if you've been lucky enough to get fairly senior in the military,
right,
it helps you in that you've been working with civil servants and with industry and others. You've got used to the language and the ways of working.
Right.
And you know how to navigate those conversations. I think some people, if you've only done military at a regimental level, it's more difficult to step straight out into a civil role. But what I've found is that everyone's there to help you. I thought it would be a much harsher environment. I mean, it's hard, but people are there to support you. It's leadership all around. It's exposing where your strengths are and asking for help where you've got areas of development. And I've found that as I've joined the company I'm in now, everyone's more than happy to help. They want the company to succeed. They want the skills that we've got. I want the skills they've got. It's about the team.
Right. Wonderful. And looking back, what do you think some of the themes are of your career so far?
I think they've always been me pushing myself to make sure I got the roles that I was really happy with, that I could take the leadership role and do the best of it. I've had to learn how to be my own kind of leader.
Okay.
Which takes time. It takes really hard work. Leadership, you don't learn it and then get on with it. It's a constant learning experience.
Absolutely.
And finding out how to lead different people in different organizations. The naivety that you can tell 5 people the same thing and they'll all hear the same words and you'll end up with the same outcome. It will just never happen. So it's learning how to work with people and get the most from them, but then also demanding the same from the people I work for, to say, look, I'm different from you. Let's work together on this, rather than them just expecting me to be exactly who they wanted. So that's been a real highlight in terms of learning that through that leadership experience, how to work with people and get the best from them.
And you've talked a couple of times about self-leadership, and reflecting, looking after yourself and so forth. What else does self-leadership mean to you?
Well, firstly, some people talk of leadership as a lonely business. I've never found it to be so.
No.
But it involves striking really strong professional relationships and having a close cohort of people who can be honest and advise you, who you can go to when there are problems, and not sitting there on your own stressing about those problems. So having a team around you that you can know and trust. And when you've got problems, and I've done it myself, I've gone to them and saying, look, people, I'm having a bad week. Things are difficult at home. So, can you help me out here? And the minute you're honest and authentic with them, they just step in. But it takes time to build a team that will do that for you. So that's been really important. I think, like all people, you have times in your life when, your parents are ill, your children are struggling at school, when life is just hard. And I found there was a period in my life when I wasn't really in control. I think we're all just trying to be everything to everyone, trying to be good at work and get promoted, trying to be a good husband and trying to be a good son and a good father. And there's times when you just can't do that.
Yeah.
And there was a point when I was just overwhelmed with everything that was going on. And I sat down and wrote my own resilience plan. I had no idea what one of those was.
Wow.
I don't think there's a template for them, but I wrote a plan of how to look after my own mental fitness, how to look after myself, what I needed to do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to look after myself, who my friends and support were that I needed to help me on that. And then also write a section on how to recover when something goes wrong, who to speak to, what to do, and gain control. Now, whether it's a correlation or a causation, I don't know, but since I did that, I have had more control and things have gone better. It was interesting of that self-leadership of taking control yourself rather than being reactive of everything life throws at you. That was a real eye-opener for me. And that was probably about 8 or 9 years ago now that I went through that process. And life has been so much more in control since that point.
I mean, Chaz, that's what a great idea. Which, if you're okay, I'm going to steal that one from you.
Absolutely.
But I mean, what a wonderful thing to think about, to build your own resilience plan. And that is about self-love and looking after yourself. Because, as you know, those in leadership have people. People rely on us.
Yeah.
And if we don't look after ourselves, we can't be the person that other people need us to be occasionally. So
just being busy all the time doesn't make you a good boss.
No,
you've got to look after yourself and be present for the people who need you.
Wow. Oh, thank you. That's great advice. Looking forward, what does the future hold for you? What does the future look like for you?
Well, certainly having landed out of the military into this great role that I'm in now, I really want to take that forward. I mean, there is a need. The nation has a difficult time with its infrastructure and its investment. There's a lot to do. And what we need is more people who are going to step into that and help us get through it. We could all walk away and complain about it, but what we need is people to walk towards the problem and solve it. So I want to be part of that. But what I also want to be is part of the development, the coaching and mentoring and the leadership that will help the next generation people get to that position, whether it be in engineering or leadership or anywhere else in the military or industry.
Right.
But it's that giving back of the experience I've got. It won't be entirely relevant to everyone, but if it gets them thinking about how they can do it themselves, then that's a step in the right direction. So keeping that thread going over the next 5 to 10 years would be really powerful for me. That's where I'd love to be.
Wonderful. And as we were speaking before we started recording, the purpose, one of the key purposes of this podcast is exactly that. It's about giving back and encouraging, coaching, thinking about future generations as we do so.
And the people, I don't think until you've given back, you don't realize the power on yourself.
No.
In that it's a selfless activity, giving back, and yet you gain so much from it. By asking people these questions, you reflect on what they're saying back, you question yourself, and you grow individually by giving back. So it's a two-way process. So as I've started coaching and mentoring over the past 6 or 7 years, I found it's helped me in all the roles that I've done as well, because by giving back, you gain yourself. So it's a wonderful experience to have to be able to do.
Absolutely. And I feel sometimes I feel guilty because I enjoy these conversations so much, because for that very reason, that you learn so much about yourself, about about different ways of looking at the world. And so it is a real win-win in itself.
Yeah, and it's good. And I've had some wonderful experiences of being coached. I had this one amazing lady who she could almost see straight into my soul. And she knew what the problems I was having were, and just said, look, you're taking the humility of leadership too far, and you're becoming self-deprecating. You've got to turn up the dial. You've got to do that. And just those little bits of advice you get from a coach that just help you see yourself better.
Yeah.
But I can then help people through those same issues as I go forward.
Wonderful. And what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
I think it's that the learning experience I've had in leadership, in being a leader that is required by the organization you're in, which requires you to engage with that organization and be accepted, but also take the time to be that authentic leader that is yourself and your own personality and your own values, and not be the thing the organization wants you to be all the time. I probably tried to be too much part of the organization to start with. It was only when I started allowing myself to lead the way I wanted to that I think I had the impact I had.
Right.
But I also probably went slightly too far in some ways, and then people didn't see me as authentic enough in the organization. So I've had to navigate that all the way through. So it's something I do with a lot of young people now, is just say, what sort of person, where are your values? How do you want to lead? And take them through that thinking process so that they can be the right leader they want to be for the organization, rather than just be the leader the organization wants them to be. And it's a difficult coaching experience, but I think it's really important to take people through that. And that's a journey I'd like to have been taken through myself, because it's taken me 30 years to get there.
And it's especially, I work a lot with young people as well. And there certainly is this almost gone the other way, where they want to be authentic to themselves. But again, having to recognize that if you're part of a larger organization, whether that's the military, whether that's an organization, a profit or non-profit, you have to fit in as well. There is that balance between being true to your own values, but recognizing you're part of something bigger that has its own set of values.
Yeah. It's hard, but leadership is not meant to be easy, is it?
No. But it's also, can be fun at the same time. It doesn't have to be serious all the time.
Well, I hope it's come out that all those wonderful experiences, the ones that are seared so strongly in my memory, are those leadership experience I've had. Most of them on operations, where the adrenaline is high, the stakes are high,
Yes.
people are amazing, the outcomes are brilliant.
Yes.
And that is the way life should be.
Yeah. And it's interesting just hearing you speak, thinking about, and one of the drivers for me for starting this podcast was, I've, like all of us, have had my own personal things to overcome. But it's those difficulties in our lives that actually make us who we are. And hearing you talk about those stressful, potentially, lethal, because you're in the forces, you are, in situations where your life is potentially at risk. But it's those stressful situations that actually make us as human beings and give us those things that we remember and build from, and make us who we are.
Yeah, and they're really formative. And I wouldn't encourage everyone to go through the same things that I went through. They've not all been fun, but in retrospect, the experience has been amazing. And it also allows me now to put things in a much better perspective.
Absolutely.
Someone's behaving in a way that I wouldn't normally expect. Maybe 20 years ago, I'd have got angry about it. Nowadays, I can just relax, life's too short to get stressed about some of those things. That person's probably got, if you can get under their skin, there's probably something that we need to get out and talk about why they're behaving like that. But let's take it as a positive thing, not a negative.
Yeah, yeah, no, and as you say, it's my advice to young people is often, things can be tough, but remember you'll get through it, and these times are tough are the things that will create you and make you a better person going forward.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Any last words, Chaz, before we round up?
I'm trying to think as I thought about what we'd talk about. There was one thing actually I noted down as I was thinking about what we might talk about was in sports, and it's the same, because sports in a way is a wonderful replication of real life in its challenges, in team building, in coaching and mentoring and bringing everything through. And I think it's a really important part of life to be able to play sport if that's what you're into. But it was also interesting how in playing rugby, people found it difficult to reconcile in me that I could be an authentic leader outside, calm and relaxed, and yet on the rugby pitch I could be something else. And people were saying, I don't understand how these two different things can exist, and yet I think they're entirely fine. You can be one type of leader in a certain situation, and you can be another type of leader in another situation, and both things can be true.
Yes.
You don't have to be a high octane rugby leader when you're at work. You can be a different type of leader for the people you've got. And again, that took me a while to understand, that you can change your leadership style, and you're not undermining your own values as a leader. You're just applying the right values to the situation you're in. And that took me a while to understand, but I think it's really important for people to take forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when I talk about, leader to the leadership training that I do, I often ask people, who do they admire? Who do they look to, in terms of a role model? Who do they want to be like? And most people will talk about their parents. And I'll ask, well, is your parent a CEO or are they a director? It's like, no, they're, often humble people. And it's like, well, that they are demonstrating leadership. They are living their values. They are providing a role model for you. If that isn't a term or a definition of leadership, then I don't know what is. And it's that same principle. You just by being who you are, being authentic, you are being a leader, a self-leader, and then you're applying that in different ways, but the core values continue to be who you are.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure you'll have listened to Simon Sinek and all his wonderful words.
Absolutely.
And the difference between, for example, in Microsoft, Steve Ballmer and Satya Nadella, in one large charisma, but actually the business didn't go in quite the right direction. Then you bring in quite an introverted, very motivated, but an individual leader with his own style, and has done amazing things with that company. And I think examples like that we need to find all over the place, to say, no, you don't have to be like the old 1980s godlike leader. You can be someone else.
No, absolutely.
Successful.
Wonderful. Well, I mean, Chaz, you haven't disappointed. It's been a wonderful, wonderful session. Thank you so much for your thoughts, for your advice, and I wish you nothing but the very, very best. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and to explain that journey. It's been good fun.
Wonderful. Thanks, Chaz.
Thank you very much.